Hi, this is Lisa. About the fourth time I'm trying to record this, but I will be doing a screencast for Chapter 11, Slavery in the Old South, from the 1800s to the 1860s. This slideshow was made by me, Lisa, and Christine Cho in Group 2. Alright, so we just start out by the cover page with some few pictures. On my right side, which is the computer's left side, it has an ad or a cover about the Negroes. It is about an ad of selling slaves. And then in the other picture, you can see how the slaves were treated. And you can kind of see the reaction and their facial expressions about how kind of what they experienced. So let's move on. Alright, so I'm going to be talking about the Lower South. In the back of the screen, I have a map of the Lower South, and you can kind of see where the Lower South was. So Florida was partially included, South Carolina, across the coast to eastern Texas. So I listed out a few vocabulary words that I thought would be helpful to know. Most of them were taken out of the context of the textbook, and the others were found online about other AP students talking about the Lower South and Chapter 11. So one was King Cotton, and it was a term used about cotton, how it was in very high demand, especially up north in the textile industry. There was a big booming, an economic booming thanks to the South, of production of cotton. Since it was a new product, a lot of people wanted to buy it, so that's why there was an economic booming. And also there was introductions to inventions like short staple cotton and the cotton gin. So the next is the gang system, and that is an organization and supervision of slave field hands into working teams on southern plantations. So it's pretty much like groups of slaves working on fields and stuff like that. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then we have the gang system, which is the organization and supervision. Oh, I just read that over. Okay, the Deep South, which was referring to the Lower South, where it was also referred to as the Cotton Kingdom, which was a whole lot of tremendous profit came out of that area because of the cotton. So it was called the Deep South, and cotton production was very booming, and it was good. And then also the Black Belt, which is the Lower South, stretching from South Carolina across the Gulf Coast to eastern Texas, and this was used dependent on the growth of cotton as a cash crop upon slave labor. So that's kind of what it was all called. The whole part of the Lower South was called the Black Belt because that's where all like the slaves were traded and all the stuff. And then the slave trade is the business or processing of selling slaves, especially Black African Americans, to the New World prior to the mid-19th century. Alright, now we're talking about the Upper South, and I put a map on the background, and it kind of outlines the Upper South, what the states were included. So they include Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, and Kentucky. They were a diverse economy compared to the Lower South states, and they were a little bit nicer to their slaves, let's say. They were more, they treated them nicer. They treated them more nice. More nice? Okay. It was better than in the Lower South. They increasingly sold their sales down the river, which was bringing them back to the Lower South, the Deep South, which is where all the cotton was made and where the abundance of slaves were since they needed them for the fields. And then Frederick Douglass is a runaway slave who became a famous speaker, author, and publisher of his own newspaper. So I have a picture right down below of him, and he was included in this whole Upper South, Lower South debacle. And here I enclosed some pictures of the time in slavery. On the upper left, well, my upper left, since I'm looking at a computer screen. I don't know how it would be yours. I guess it would be right. But right here is a picture, and it's a very famous picture, and it says, "Am I not a man and a brother?" which shows a Black slave on his knees, but pretty much begging for mercy because he's not treated humanely, and he's pretty much treated like an animal, the conditions that they were. So here are some other pictures. Like you can see the conditions that they are, how they pretty much were treated like dogs, as you can see. This man has a collar on his face. And then here, this is a quote from Harriet Beecher Stowe, who was an abolitionist author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is a very famous book of the time. It's a very famous book of the time. She helped runaway slaves. And it says it's a matter of taking the side of the weak against the strong, something the best people have always done. And then on the lower page is the slaves on a stirrup ranch plantation in South Carolina. And this picture was taken by the rear of the house. I'm reading it out of the textbook because this picture was in the textbook. And the occasion was the 75th birthday of Captain James Rembrandt. That's also a picture. And over here you can also see some slaves. Now just talking about slave life and culture, there was a lot of rebellion and uprisings against the slaves. Like there was Nat Turner Rebellion, which was a slave uprising in Virginia in 1831, and it was designed to spread terror among whites to protest slavery. It was a very bloody rebellion. It resulted in 55 whites dead, and at least as many of blacks in revision of the slave code laws throughout the South. So it was actually a very successful, but it was also really violent. Here is a picture of Nat Turner's rebellion. And just a little before Nat Turner was Gabriel Prosser's rebellion, and that was a failed rebellion. And it was the Gabriel Rebellion was a large slave rebellion organized by Gabriel Prosser. He was an enslaved blacksmith from Richmond. Information of his rebellion leaked and he was hanged. So it was not as successful. A lot of information was left. Also, planters rarely provided their slaves with more than the bare necessities. They lived off scarce portions of cornmeal and salt pork, and they lived in really small one-room cabins. And that is it.